Friends, if I want to watch super hit movie Conclave in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Conclave. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it. All the interesting facts about this movie in today's video, I'm going to tell you. I am also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, star cast, actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end. Start the video. Conclave is a 2024 mystery thriller film directed by Edward Berger, written by Peter Straughan, based on the 2016 novel of the same name by Robert Harris. The film stars Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, Sergio Castellitto, and Isabella Rossellini. In the film, Cardinal Thomas Lawrence Fiennes organizes a papal conclave to elect the next pope, and finds himself investigating secrets and scandals about each candidate. Conclave premiered at the 51st Telluride Film Festival on the 30th of August 2024, was theatrically released in the United States by Focus Features on the 25th of October 2024, and is scheduled to be released in the United Kingdom by Blackberry UK on the 29th of November. The film received positive reviews from critics, with specific praise for the performances and cinematography. Plot. After the Pope dies of a heart attack, the College of Cardinals gathers in seclusion for a papal conclave to choose the new pope, under the leadership of Cardinal Dean Thomas Lawrence. The college is surprised to meet Archbishop Benitez of Kabul, who explains that the old pope secretly made him a cardinal. The four main candidates for pope are 1. Bellini, a liberal in the vein of the late pope; 2. Adeyemi, an economic progressive with socially conservative views; 3. Tremblay, a mainstream conservative; and 4. Tedesco, a traditionalist who wants to abandon parts of the Second Vatican Council, particularly the use of vernacular languages in Mass, Novus Ordo, and the policy of peaceful coexistence with other religions, Nostra Aetate. Tedesco is also a racist and mistreats his assistants. In addition, it is implied that Tremblay and Adeyemi used their positions in the Vatican bureaucracy to overwork the Pope to death. Bellini and Lawrence are the two leaders of the Church's liberal wing, but neither claims to want the job. Bellini believes that feigning reluctance will earn voters' respect. Lawrence's position is more complicated, as he recently tried to resign his post as dean due to a crisis of faith. Although Lawrence votes for Bellini, Bellini senses that Lawrence is withholding his full support. Before the first vote, Lawrence gives a speech encouraging the cardinals to embrace diversity, which is seen as a campaign speech. In addition, although Lawrence is not supposed to contact the outside world in conclave, he begins gathering opposition research against several leading candidates, rationalizing to himself that he is merely conducting an independent investigation to protect the Church. The late Pope's confidant tells Lawrence that the Pope demanded Tremblay's resignation before dying. Tremblay denies this and offers an eyewitness who defends Tremblay but mentions a report that was withdrawn. After the first vote, no candidate is close to the two-thirds majority needed for election. However, Adeyemi has a slight edge, and Bellini and Lawrence split the liberal vote. Without a unity candidate, the liberals consolidate behind Adeyemi. Bellini, who despises Adeyemi's homophobia, secretly agrees to support Tremblay's candidacy in exchange for a prestigious bureaucratic appointment. One of the nuns, who handle catering for the conclave, causes a stir by confronting Adeyemi in the cardinal's refectory. She confesses to Lawrence that she had a son with Adeyemi when she was 19 and he 30. Lawrence confronts Adeyemi, who confirms the story. Although Lawrence is duty-bound to keep the secret, a whisper campaign derails the latter's candidacy. Adeyemi suspects a setup, as the nun had never left Nigeria before appearing at the conclave. The head nun, Sister Agnes, informs Lawrence that Tremblay transferred the nun to the Vatican. Lawrence tries to blackmail Tremblay into stepping down, but Tremblay proudly admits to exposing Adeyemi and accuses Lawrence of coveting the papacy for himself. Lawrence breaks into the late Pope's apartment and finds documents showing that Tremblay bribed cardinals for votes. Bellini urges Lawrence to burn the documents but reconsiders and switches his support to Lawrence. Lawrence and Agnes ruin Tremblay's reputation by publicizing his bribery, leaving Lawrence and Tedesco as the only remaining candidates. During the fifth vote, a suicide bomber attacks the Vatican, killing 52 people and damaging the Sistine Chapel. Tedesco blames Islamists and calls for the church to fight against Islam. Benitez asks, "What do you know of war?" while he has seen its true cost during his time in the Congo, Baghdad, and Kabul, and that the church must move forward rather than cling to tradition. He also scolds the cardinals for focusing on politics and schemes over their religious mission. Moved, the cardinals elect Benitez as pope. Shortly before Benitez's election is announced, Lawrence is informed that the late pope had paid for Benitez to visit a clinic for a laparoscopic hysterectomy, news that would force Benitez to step down if made public. He confronts Benitez, who explains that he did not know he was any different until he had an appendectomy as an adult, and the surgeon discovered that he has a uterus. He is intersex, assigned male at birth, and has a penis, uterus, and ovaries. Benitez chose to keep his female organs, as I am as God made me. Lawrence keeps Benitez's secret, as his loyalty to the old pope exceeds his ambition. He stares out his dormitory window as the crowds cheer Benitez's election. Cast Ralph Fiennes as Thomas Cardinal Lawrence, a British liberal and the Dean of the College of Cardinals. Stanley Tucci as Aldo Cardinal Bellini, an American liberal. John Lithgow as Joseph Cardinal Tremblay, a Canadian conservative. Sergio Castellitto as Goffredo Cardinal Tedesco, an Italian traditionalist. Isabella Rossellini as Sister Agnes, the cardinal's head caterer and housekeeper. Lucian Misamati as Joshua Cardinal Adeyemi, a Nigerian social conservative and economic progressive. Carlos Diaz as Vincent Cardinal Benitez, a little-known Filipino archbishop working in Afghanistan. Brian F. O'Byrne as Monsignor Raymond O'Malley. Lawrence's assistant and opposition researcher, Merab Ninidze, as Cardinal Sabaton Thomas Leubel, as Archbishop Mandorf. Jacek Koman as Archbishop Wozniak, the prefect of the papal household and the late Pope's confidant Loris Lodi. It as Cardinal Villanueva. Production. It was announced in May 2022 that Ralph Fiennes, John Lithgow, Stanley Tucci, and Isabella Rossellini were set to star in the film, with Edward Berger directing. Additional casting was announced in January 2023, as production began in Rome. Filming also took place in Cinecittà, 9. Filming concluded in March. Release. In August 2022, Black Bear Pictures' newly founded British distribution arm acquired UK distribution rights to the film from FilmNation Entertainment, serving as one of its first acquisitions and maiden releases in the United Kingdom. Black Bear's company Elevation Pictures also serves as Canadian distributor. Stephen Rails served as one of the executive producers, co-financing the film via his production company, Indian Paintbrush. In November 2023, Focus Features acquired U.S. distribution rights to the film. In July 2024, Conclave was announced as part of the Special Presentations section for the 2024 Toronto International Film Festival scheduled for September 8, 2024. The film would subsequently be announced as part of the lineup for the Telluride Film Festival, where it will have its world premiere. 16. Venice Film Festival director Alberto Barbera explained why the film did not play at Venice. "I didn't think it was a competition film for Venice, but I invited it out of competition. We tried to figure out timing for it to play here and at Telluride, which they also wanted, but we couldn't find the right dates and timing for it to work. We discussed various options but couldn't get the time that suited everyone. It's a shame." The film was released in the United States on the 25th of October 2024. It was previously scheduled for a limited theatrical release on the 1st of November, before opening wide on the following week. It is scheduled to be released in the United Kingdom on the 29th of November. Reception. Box office. In the United States and Canada, Conclave was released alongside Venom, The Last Dance, and was projected to gross $4 to $6 million from 1,753 theaters in its opening weekend. The film made $2.5 million on its first day, including $500,000 from Thursday night previews. It went on to debut to $6.5 million, finishing in third, 77% of its audience was over 35 years old, while 67% was Caucasian. Critical response: on the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 92% of 142 critics reviews are positive, with an average rating of 8/10. The website's consensus reads, carrying off papal pulp with immaculate execution and career highlight work from Ralph Fiennes, Conclave is a godsend for audiences who crave intelligent entertainment. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 79 out of 100, based on 38 critics, indicating generally favorable. Reviews: audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B+ on an A+ to F scale, while those surveyed by PostTrack gave it an 84% overall positive score, with 62% saying they would definitely recommend it. The film's cinematography received praise. The film's ensemble cast was also praised, with Fiennes and Castellitto's performances receiving particular acclaim. The plot received some criticism, with Katie Walsh of the Los Angeles Times calling it a pretty thin and silly mystery that seems like it's deeper than it actually is. IndieWire's David Ehrlich agreed that the film was very silly but wonderfully staged, even if the film might be a bit too convinced of its own dramatic import. The Chicago Tribune's Michael Phillips praised the film's delicious portraits in pursuit, deceit, and evasion, but noted that the climactic suicide bombing was the most shameless coincidental timing of a huge explosion since who knows when. Vanity Fair's Richard Lawson said that the film rightly portrayed both the seriousness of the conclave process and the campy ridiculousness of it, and thought that the film touches fingers with prestige greatness while keeping its feet firmly planted in the realm of rollicking entertainment. Manohla Dargis of the New York Times noted that the film's stance towards the Catholic Church mirrors Hollywood's own stance towards its film industry: lightly cynical, self-flattering, and finally, myth-stoking. Critics disagreed on the final twist regarding Benitez's sexual organs. Lawson called it reckless and insufficiently thought through, while Variety's Peter DeBruge called it one of the most satisfying twists in years, a Hail Mary that both surprises and restores one's faith. Maybe not everyone's, but certainly that of the disillusioned. Religious response. John Mulderig of the Catholic OSV News opined that in Conclave, rival viewpoints within the church are caricatured with a broad brush, and the deck is predictably stacked in favor of those who advocate change. He warned that all moviegoers committed to the church's creeds will want to approach this earnest, visually engaging but manipulative, and sometimes sensationalist production with caution. The Archdiocese of Los Angeles, Angelus magazine complimented several of the actors' performances but dismissed the film, writing that the problem here is not that it is full of bias against the Catholic Church. The problem is that it is just plain bad. At the crucial moment, Benitez gives a speech so full of platitudes it could have been written by ChatGPT. 4. On the other hand, the progressive National Catholic Reporter praised the film, calling it a compelling and ecclesial call for a renewed spiritual stewardship characterized by humility, meekness, and, curiously, doubt. Kate Luckey of Christianity Today, an evangelical publication, called the film gorgeous and riveting, and said that, though the film subtly advances progressive convictions, it gives cardinals of all ideological persuasions equal opportunity to fall short. Ralph Fiennes, looking tortured, leads a tense search for a new pope. Few writers delve into the bowels of power quite like novelist Robert Harris, whose smart Vatican-set drama brings out a less bombastic side of All Quiet on the Western Front. Director Edward: if you think the American presidential election has been unpredictable, wait till you see how capricious things get at the Vatican when the cardinals assemble to choose a new pope in Conclave. Adapted from the Robert Harris novel by Edward Berger, who assumes a very different challenge after All Quiet on the Western Front, this thinking man's thriller unfolds like a murder mystery behind the locked doors of the Domus Sanctae Marthae, where the College of Cardinals is cloistered. Except no one suspects foul play in the previous pontiff's death. Still, intrigues abound as the Papabili, those considered next in line for the job, played by such formidable actors as Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and John Lithgow, pull whatever levers they can to be elected. But Conclave obviously concurs with Plato's adage, Only those who do not seek power are qualified to hold it, featuring a host of candidates who seem positively British in their self-effacing humility, side by side with others ambitious enough to sabotage their rivals. Just when you think you've got it figured out, Conclave lobs one of the most satisfying twists in years, a Hail Mary that both surprises and restores one's faith, maybe not everyone's, but certainly that of the disillusioned. As a rule, movies about living popes, like those made by Gianfranco Rosi, Wim Wenders, and Evgeny Afanevsky about Pope Francis in recent years, are intended for devout believers, while movies about the papacy's transition of power appeal far more broadly, especially to those looking to see their suspicions reinforced about the pettiness and corruption of the Curia. The Catholic Church has a spotty past when it comes to picking pontiffs, so it isn't such a stretch to find venal, licentious, and racist men among the contenders here. They're all men, of course, since the Church remains stubbornly sexist, even as other religions have embraced female leaders. A point that's definitely not lost on Harris, Berger, or screenwriter Peter Straughan, the same brain who adapted Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Conclave addresses that imbalance by casting Isabella Rossellini as the all-seeing Sister Agnes, who bites her tongue for almost 2 hours, but also knows when to open her mouth. The unenviable task of trying to corral these strong-willed men for the all-important vote falls to Fiennes' character, Cardinal Lawrence, who reluctantly serves as dean of the process, relieved to know he will soon be reassigned far from the Holy See. It's a quietly conflicted performance for Fiennes, who appears ravaged by Lawrence's internal struggle between devotion and doubt. In private conversations with Cardinal Bellini Tucci, the papabile for whom he repeatedly casts his ballot, he admits to the crisis in his own faith. He's surprised to learn that the late Pope had doubts as well. His were with the future of the Church, however. Though Conclave plays like a thriller, with disorienting jump cuts and a tense string score to match, what makes it so compelling are its insights into the embattled institution, whose past leaders have included a former member of the Hitler Youth, Pope Benedict XVI, and those who covered up sex abuse cases, Pope John Paul II. Straughan's script acknowledges as much, and while it's not as philosophically satisfying as the imagined conversation of the two popes a few years back, it does articulate, in no fewer than 4 languages, including Latin, how the Church must evolve in order to remain relevant to a fast-evolving world, allowing Benitez, Carlos Diaz, a soft-spoken cardinal from Kabul, of all places, to enlighten the others. Conclave is one of those rare films that respects the audience's attention, even as it sneaks a few tricks behind their backs, like the way one candidate climbs with each passing vote. But where does that character's support come from? In any case, we're more focused on the war of words between the liberal and conservative factions of the Church, during which Lawrence wrestles with his conscience. A few of his peers cast their votes for Lawrence, who insists he's unworthy. Still, he encourages the cardinals to select someone who sins and asks for forgiveness, over the charlatan who claims to be pure. Berger is clearly fascinated by the pomp and protocol of the actual vote-taking, which occurs in the Sistine Chapel, or a convincing replica thereof built on the stages of Cinecittà. The Helmer meticulously depicts how ballots are filled out, folded, and ceremoniously deposited into a large silver urn, then counted, bound and burned. The public, never seen, gather beyond the walls, studying the chimney above the Sistine Chapel. Black smoke means the cardinals have not reached a majority. When the smoke turns white, however, the new pontiff has been chosen. During this fictional conclave, the cardinals find themselves staring out the Vatican windows and seeing smoke in the city around them, an alarming twist on the solemn process. Terrorists are setting car bombs in the piazza outside, which underscores the stakes of the cardinal's choice. Berger may be German, but he almost certainly considered what Conclave has to say about American politics in this moment. Here, the cardinals are surrounded by division, and they can reach for unity or respond with hate. Despondent as Fiennes' character can be at times, the unexpected way things play out feels almost perfect, like an answered prayer. This review was originally published on September 11, 2024, out of the Toronto International Film Festival. We are recirculating it now that Conclave is in theaters. Conclave begins with the image of a cardinal tensely making his way along a Roman highway late at night, his crimson biretta cap clasped tightly in his hand. It's a stark, almost funny image, the elegant robes of this high priest trudging through a bleak, contemporary urban setting. The characters of Conclave won't spend much time in the world at large. This is one of the few times we will see one outside in Edward Berger's film. But the dissonance will continue to resonate. These are men carrying out what they view as an ancient function, electing a new pope, now that the old one has died. They diligently shut out the modern world, but it's still there, outside the windows and beyond the doors, constantly felt in everything they do. At the center of the squall is Thomas Lawrence, Ralph Fiennes, the dean of the College of Cardinals, whose job it is to run the conclave, as cardinals from around the world gather inside the hallowed sanctuary of the Sistine Chapel to cast ballots for a new pontiff. It's a perfect role for Fiennes, who can do both placidity and intensity, sometimes, somehow, all at once. Thomas exudes gentleness and tolerance. He's a deeply conflicted man who admits, in an initial address to the conclave, that he values doubt and abhors certainty. And yet, as the picture proceeds, he becomes more obsessed with controlling the outcome. Berger's film is adapted, quite faithfully, from Robert Harris's 2016 novel, and it combines the pulp velocity of a great airport read with the gravitas of high drama. It solemnly depicts the ornate rituals around the death of the Pope, the ribbons placed across his door and fastened with melted wax, the seals clipped off his rings, the constant prayers and the secretive mutterings. With only a slight nod to the sheer pointlessness of it all, it means something to these men, and that's enough. Same, too, with the lugubrious dance of the conclave itself, with its round after round of balloting and tallying and quiet reflecting. Many film critics who participate in year-end awards voting will find themselves nodding with recognition during conclave at how allegiances shift between ballots in response to who's ahead, who's likely to win, and whose support seems to be crumbling. I have no idea how accurate this is to the way cardinals actually vote, but both the book and the movie have the confident ring of truth, or at least truthiness. And it's interesting to learn that the very serious men who elect popes scheme as effectively as the New York Film Critics Circle did when it voted well-deserving underdog Rachel Weisz Best Actress in 2012 to prevent frontrunners Jessica Chastain and Jennifer Lawrence from getting the prize instead. Or when the warring camps of Days of Heaven and Deer Hunter supporters at the National Society of Film Critics in 1978 famously fought each other to a standstill and allowed Bertrand Blier's Get Out Your Handkerchiefs to sneak in and win Best Picture that year. Where was I? Oh right, conclave. Amid such stately ceremony, Berger finds ways to insert gradually escalating tumult and cattiness. Though he tries to be fair and balanced, Thomas is allied with Aldo Bellini, Stanley Tucci, a progressive candidate who wants to continue the church's liberalization and engagement with the world. Opposing them is Goffredo Tedesco, Sergio Castellitto, a reactionary Italian who thinks the church has been on the wrong track ever since it got rid of the Latin Mass in the 1960s. But there are other candidates as well, chiefly Joseph Tremblay, John Lithgow, a supreme politician who, for all his outward soft-spoken humility, clearly has great ambitions. And then there's Joshua Adeyemi, Lucian Misamati, a charismatic cardinal from Nigeria who could become the first black pope. None of these people actively campaign for the papacy, save maybe for the flamboyant Tedesco, a not very big role that Castellitto turns into a full rollicking meal. They're all lowered eyebrows and hushed whispers and collegial exchanges, soberly prostrating themselves before God and seeking his guidance, all the while quietly and viciously stabbing each other in the back. Such muted machinations present a wonderful showcase for these actors, as well as Isabella Rossellini, as a head nun who becomes more central to the plot, and the relatively unknown Mexican actor Carlos Diaz, as a heretofore unknown cardinal named Vincent Benitez. Secretly named the Archbishop of Kabul, Benitez shows up unannounced on the day of the conclave and sends what promised to be a predictable gathering into the first of its many entertaining tailspins. Despite the fact that they've all been cocooned deep inside the Vatican, with the doors barred, The priests of Conclave are all quite aware of how everything they do will have real-world repercussions, particularly in the way the church is perceived. That fragile isolation isn't just a psychological element. We sense throughout that the outside world is undergoing turmoil of which these men are mostly unaware, though we suspect they soon will be, both metaphorically and physically. Berger expertly milks that anticipation, then nails several artfully heated and lively climaxes. My audience at the Telluride Film Festival began roaring with delight and surprise, and I've heard similar reports out of Toronto screenings as well. So, well, don't be surprised if this sinfully entertaining movie wins a few award signs. The performances and dialogue crackle like electricity in Conclave. Every frame is gorgeously composed, with stunning visuals that underscore the story's surprising twists that thrill on two different levels. It takes us inside an ancient, mysterious process that has inspired endless curiosity for hundreds of years: the assembly of Catholic cardinals to select a new pope. Here and there, it touches lightly on parallels to the less secret struggles for power and disputes about foundational values that are only too familiar to us. The chance to peek into the arcane details of the process is fascinating. Still, it is the universal humanity, the ambition, the manipulation, the grand visions, the pettiness, the disagreements about faith versus doubt, progress versus tradition, we versus they that resonate most deeply. As Us Magazine would put it, cardinals, they're just like us. Conclave is smart, provocative, sometimes funny, and determined to make us rethink our initial impressions. It challenges us to challenge ourselves and is wildly entertaining. One of the year's standout films, it begins with some heavy breathing as Cardinal Lawrence Fiennes rushes, carrying a briefcase and his zucchetto, the red skull cap worn by cardinals as a matter of custom, not formal religious observance. The Pope is dying, and Lawrence takes his place beside the other clergy, praying at his bedside. Then, he is gone. The next task is to remove the ring of the fisherman from His Holiness' hand so they can destroy the seal. This involves some ungraceful tugging, the first indication that the transition will not be an easy one. There will be many others, and we will hear more stressed breathing later. Cardinal Lawrence, by virtue of his position as dean, will preside over the College of Cardinals, sequestered in a special dormitory to select the next pope by vote. They meet in the Sistine Chapel. The ballots are filled out and counted by hand. Then they are burned. The only communication during this process is by smoke, gray, for a ballot that did not result in enough votes for any one candidate to make a selection, white when the selection is made. It is sometimes said that positions of great power should go only to those wise and humble enough not to want them. That may apply especially to the position of Pope, intended to be a lifetime appointment as head of the Catholic Church and Vatican City. Once selected, he is understood to be the ultimate authority, protected from error when he speaks on matters of faith and morals from the chair of Peter, or ex cathedra. As one of the cardinals points out, anyone who has risen to that position in the Church has mused on which name he would select if he were selected. Lawrence, whose doubts about his role were great enough that he had planned to ask to leave his position, does his best to meet the conflicting needs of the cardinals. While he says at one point he does not want to hear about any concerns that might make a candidate unworthy, when he sees or hears an issue with suitability, he pursues it, even to the point of breaking a rule. Given that all of the candidates are limited in some way because they are humans, what is worse, a past sin, an unethical ploy to top the list in the voting, or a commitment to policies he and many others consider reactionary and harmful? Lawrence, after all, is very aware of the Church's past failings and the need to avoid any reputational damage. The superb cast includes John Lithgow as a candidate whose currying of support may have crossed a line from unseemly to unethical, and Lucian Samadi as an African bishop whose selection could be an opportunity to send a message of inclusion, though a secret from his past might be disqualifying. Lawrence supports his friend, Cardinal Bellini, Stanley Tucci, a standout even in this stellar array of performances, who is candid about his liberal views and thus scares off many potential supporters. At the other end of the spectrum is the Catholic version of Fire and Brimstone, Cardinal Tedesco, Sergio Castellitto, who wants to bring back Latin and kick out anyone out of the church who does not meet his limited ideas of suitability. Isabella Rossellini is formidable as a nun who, as she says, is supposed to be invisible, but cannot help but have eyes and ears. And, though she does not add this, a mouth with something to say. Cinematographer Stéphane Fontaine makes the most of the setting's striking visuals. The rows of cardinals in their iconic red robes, the multicolor striped uniforms of the Swiss Guards, and the magnificent architectural details of the Vatican. The contrast between the vibrant colors, the masterpieces of art and design, the representation of centuries of tradition, and the human failings and petty manipulations is utterly gripping. The movie takes on an almost door-slamming farcical tone. Even in the sequestered quarters, rumors, revelations, and events take the characters on a breathing Rubik's Cube-style series of twists and turns. The final surprise may seem outrageous initially, but it is crafted to fit the story as satisfyingly as the last piece of a jigsaw puzzle. There's something hilarious and wonderful about seeing actors you know striding importantly around a soundstage version of the Vatican while dressed in official cardinal garb. That's the magic of Edward Berger's papal drama Conclave, or at least part of it. Stanley Tucci wearing his red zucchetto tilted jauntily toward the back of his head, 30s newsboy style? Sign me up. Ralph Fiennes indicating that the metaphorical burden on his shoulders is much, much greater than the actual weight of his scarlet capelet. I'm all over it. Conclave, the story of a huddle of cardinals scheming and counter-scheming as they attempt to choose a new pope, is great fun. It is also fiction. The screenplay was adapted from Robert Harris's novel by Peter Straughan, but even as it captures the allure of Vatican style, the swingy gold ecclesiastical necklaces, those soft red leather slippers, it makes a more overarching serious point. The Catholic Church must change, or risk becoming as desiccated as the bones of a long-dead saint. Fiennes plays Cardinal Lawrence, a papal dignitary who, upon the death of the big boss, the Holy Father, is responsible for gathering all the world's cardinals at the Vatican to elect a replacement. This responsibility makes him miserable. Not long ago, he'd tried to slip out of his vaunted position, citing a crisis of faith about the church, not God. But the boss said no. Now, there's no stopping the stream of cardinals hustling to the Vatican from all over the world. Conclave was filmed largely at Cinecittà Studios, and its facsimiles of the Vatican's painted treasures and delicately veined marble interiors appear to be dutifully accurate. Awaiting the arrival of these vaunted men is an army of nuns who greet them by popping their tablets into plastic bags. There must be no contact with the outside world, as they fulfill the somber task of pope replacement. These nuns will also act as silent servants, ferrying the men's food from kitchen to table with cheerful acquiescence. The chief nun is Sister Agnes, Isabella Rossellini, convincingly no-nonsense, who oversees all this women's work, ensuring it's up to the unmeetable standards of these very important guys. As well as the Lord Father above, most of the cardinals arrive humbly, merely wishing to fulfill their mission as responsibly as possible. Among those is Cardinal Benitez, Carlos Diaz, who's originally from Mexico but has been serving the church from, of all places, Kabul. He's so under the radar that Lawrence doesn't even have him on the guest list. But others are angling visibly for the job. The dead pope's right-hand guy, John Lithgow's Cardinal Tremblay, thinks he's a shoo-in, but you can tell his motives are impure by the way he ogles his former boss's golden rings and things. Cardinal Bellini, Tucci, is much more humble and far more liberal. He also believes an Italian, like himself, would make the best pope. As he and Lawrence make cardinal small talk, he points with undisguised disgust at Cardinal Adeyemi, Lucian Misamati, who is black, indicating what a horror it would be if someone like that were to get the job. Lawrence and Bellini know what's up. As the selection process commences, the men gather solemnly in the Sistine Chapel to drop their white voting cards onto a little golden plate. They know they've got to persuade the other cardinals to vote strategically. Scene by scene, the intrigue mounts. There are scandals. There are whistleblowers who are perhaps a little too fond of the drink and thus possibly untrustworthy. There's even a terrorist attack. Through it all, Sister Agnes wrangles her servant nuns with the utmost efficiency, seeing everything and saying nothing. Meanwhile, Lawrence becomes more and more anxious. The weight of overseeing this momentous decision, one that will determine the church's near and far future, is almost too much for him to bear. Beneath his red cap, his eyes glimmer with exquisite anguish. Here and there, violins saw ominously. At one point, the cardinals, all dressed in crisp red and white, board a bus to a fancy meeting area decorated with gold lions. The visual sumptuousness of Conclave and its fake Vatican is off the charts. It might be enough to make you want to convert. Maybe. In Berger's hands, it all works a treat, right up to the movie's shockaroo surprise ending. Berger's 2022 All Quiet on the Western Front won the Best International Feature Oscar, and he guides this film too, with a sure and steady hand. Any person who was brought up as a Catholic will tell you that we're suckers for pageantry. You can't blame us. We were raised on an irresistible combo of spiritual mystery and fancy gold embroidery. Conclave allows us to revel in all that stuff, but there's a somber undercurrent here too. In the end, the film is pro-church, but only if the institution can bend toward the future, inviting individuals and groups it has marginalized into the fold. It needs to radically rethink its archaic views of women's roles within, and welcome, rather than alienate, the LGBTQ population. In other words, it needs to be more like the actual Jesus, and less like the movie's Cardinal Tedesco. Do the Cardinals of Conclave fulfill that mission? You'll have to see for yourself. Meanwhile, remember that not all superheroes wear capes. But then again, the actor leads a top-tier ensemble, including Stanley Tucci and Isabella Rossellini, in an entertainingly juicy adaptation of Robert Harris's novel. Like the easily devoured paperback it's based on, pulpy papal thriller Conclave has a brisk, page-turning allure, filled with juicy intrigue and mystery, a beach read that would follow you back home after. We've become grimly accustomed to plot-heavy bestsellers such as this, stretched out into indulgent 10-episode seasons of television, such as the recently misjudged readaptation of Scott Turo's Presumed Innocent on Apple TV+, a baggy overextension of stories that demand a tighter grip. So it's a mercy of sorts to see All Quiet on the Western Front's Edward Berger transform Robert Harris's unput-downable potboiler into a brisk, contained feature instead, a 2-hour escape to the Vatican that knows exactly when to drop us in and take us out. It's a fairly dry setup in theory, but Harris and playwright Peter Straughan, who co-wrote 2011's equally involving adaptation of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, have found humor and suspense in the fictionalized hunt for a new pope, an election that propels a timely and tense political thriller. Scheduled to be released in the US just days before a real one takes place. Some of the nods toward its topicality were met with knowing laughs at its Toronto Film Festival premiere, a comparison to an American political convention, and a sigh at having to make the less worst option. But it's not a film straining too hard for such dot joining. Because like any election, it's a fraught one with high stakes regardless. Here in a contemporary setting, there are competing sides, hoping to push Catholicism either back or forward, to embrace diversity or to expel it. It's one of the many electric tensions in the film, busied with debates over what a modern church should look like, what sacrifices must be considered, and how hard it remains to convince some of the need to evolve. After the death of the sitting pope, Cardinal Lawrence, Ralph Fiennes, is forced to put aside any grief and focus on the urgent task at hand, putting together a conclave, bathed in secrecy to decide upon a successor. He's closely aligned with the reluctant U.S. candidate Bellini, Stanley Tucci, whose liberalism compels him to stand against the more traditional and bigoted Italian Tedesco, Sergio Castellitto. They also face competition from the more powerful American Tremblay, John Lithgow, the increasingly popular Nigerian Adeyemi, Lucian Samadi, and a surprise, mysterious contender in the shape of Benitez, Carlos Diaz, who has been working in Kabul. The rules dictated by the conclave make for a neat escalation of suspense, with no information technically allowed in or out. Lawrence isn't keen to play Poirot, but the more he finds out about the candidates from shreds of information shared by those around him, the more he is compelled to bend the rules, in need of hard facts over hearsay. Fiennes makes for a compelling and unknowable detective, operating under extreme circumstances, as he also starts to rise in power himself, gaining votes he claims not to want. He has to work through his own morality compared to the church's and weigh up the greater good with the personal cost. And after being snubbed for playing a very different sort of manager in the Grand Budapest Hotel, one can see him returning to the Academy fold here. A quietly commanding turn. Gently carrying the film on his shoulders, it's a thriller of character actors talking in rooms, but Berger gives it a dynamism which makes it glide. And after this and his Oscar-winning war film, one can see why he was briefly linked to the next Bond movie, a rumor he has enthusiastically denied. He guides a wealth of great performances aside from Fiennes, including a wonderfully imperious Lithgow and a steadily unraveling Tucci, with room for a scene-securing Isabella Rossellini as an observant nun, who's so fun to watch in just a handful of scenes that you wish she had just a bit more to do. The film picks at knotty discussions. Is a black pope really a sign of progress if he holds vile views towards the LGBTQ+ community? How much can you tweak and modernize an ancient religion before it loses its shape entirely? And I'd argue that sometimes it could have picked a little harder, leaving interesting threads a little underexplored. But the naughtiest is left for the finale, when a twist takes the film to new and surprising territory. I predict some potentially furious discourse upon release, but I think it's handled here with just about enough maturity if taken the right way, an opinion that may not be shared by some. The nature of the twist, together with the high-volume score, some crowd-pleasing gotchas, and some sinister vaping, remind us that Conclave is a glossily transferred airport novel first and a deeper drama about the world of religion second. Given how few high-class thrillers of this scale we actually get on the big screen at this moment, I would vote for more. Conclave is screening at the Toronto Film Festival and will be released in US cinemas on the 1st November and in the UK on the 25th of November. Let the shameless Oscar bait begin with Conclave, 2024. A faithful adaptation of a Robert Harris novel, starring Ralph Fiennes as Dean Thomas Lawrence of the College of Cardinals, who would prefer to have less responsibility, but is tasked with overseeing the papal conclave to select the next pope. With tons of twists and turns, Lawrence must wrestle with his grief, suspicions, and doubts. Will the right pope be chosen? I have been a fan of Ralph Fiennes since Quiz Show, 1994. Well, Schindler's List, 1993, but he played a sadistic Nazi commandant, and who wants to be remembered for that kind of role? Well, as Lawrence, Fiennes will not have to worry about that. His famous downturned mouth and predominantly dour on-screen demeanor are ideal for the tortured cardinal protagonist. Not permitted any time to process the sudden death of a person whom he loves, and with almost no privacy, Lawrence must hit the ground running and safeguard the church's future. Though a rare treat, Fiennes is also deft at playing more humorous roles, and Fiennes' timing offers an almost indiscernible dry wit that makes Conclave a funnier movie than expected for a film with such a somber veneer. To the surprise of no one, a bunch of men immersed in ornate pageantry can be a bunch of catty, gossiping little bitches, more suitable for a high school cafeteria than the most secret, exclusive confines in Rome. While it is probably not a coincidence that a pope selection by vote coincides with the timing of the U.S.'s presidential election, and ostensibly has a message about how to choose people when casting your ballot, it never loses sight of the fact that a movie must be entertaining. I'm talking to you. Rumors, 2024. Lawrence is like the detective responsible for unraveling a mystery and gets the moral authority to dive into everyone's business without being accused of being a messy bitch, though a couple of characters accuse him of serving manipulation on Dick Cheney levels. However, the moviegoer has the benefit of seeing how he is casting his vote, actively campaigning for his favorite character and trying to get out of the job. There were times when I wondered if he was lying to himself, but the fact that he is the only cardinal who talks about God more than factions, it is a good sign that he is a straight arrow. He is torn between wanting to make the best decision and obeying the rules. But if he does the latter, the prior cannot be accomplished. Monsignor Raymond O'Malley, terrific character actor Brian F. O'Brien, think a non-sassy Dennis O'Hare, functions as Lawrence's eyes and ears. His closest friend, work colleague, and the former Pope's confidant and Secretary of State, Cardinal Aldo Bellini, Stanley Tucci, is the Bernie of the group. He is unflinching about his liberal stance and denies wanting the position, but uses inflamed rhetoric and cares more about making sure that Cardinal Goffredo Tedesco, Sergio Castellitto, does not get on the throne. Tedesco is the president of the bunch who misses the good old Latin Mass days and would prefer to rewind the clock prior to the Second Vatican Council. He makes racist implications against the increase of African cardinals and stops short of saying that he misses the Crusades. Cardinal Joseph Tremblay, an understated John Lithgow, a bureaucrat whose actions give the impression of being power-hungry, never stops professing his innocence even when he seems to be caught red-headed. The movie never indicates whether the deceased pope just set up so his preferred pick could get the job. Cardinal Joseph Adeyemi, Lucian Samadi, appears to be in the lead, and after Lawrence, most interested in the spiritual side of his job, but is a known homophobic candidate and may have skeletons in his closet. Sister Agnes, Isabella Rossellini, may have the goods on both men. Then there is dark horse Vincent Benitez, Carlos Diaz, the Pope's secret cardinal who actively worked in war-torn areas like Kabul, who functions as Lawrence's unofficial counselor. While Conclave will result in pearl-clutching and horror over the treatment of the Catholic Church, the heart of this thriller is deeply old-fashioned in a 70s way, with professionals completely devoted to their job 24/7 with a deep, latent faith in the institution and trust in the process. Director Edward Berger is reverential and meticulous in the way that he visually dissects and depicts the pomp and circumstance of this election. If anyone has any doubts, a terrorist attack becomes a contemporary act of God through the hands of evil men to inject light and air into the proceedings, as if the Holy Spirit needed to re-enter the temple so the cardinals could make the right decision. A clever person of faith would love this movie because it depicts a world where the Pope, Bruno Novelli, is an infallible visionary and puppet master beyond the grave, and imperfect men are still capable of hearing and obeying God's word. It is not going to happen, but it should, because that is what people of faith are supposed to believe. Instead, they will be scandalized as the religious authorities were when Jesus had a physical body that trod the earth. It seemed obvious to me who would win based on one nominee's prayer. One constant, but rarely verbalized theme is the role of women in the church. All the cardinals get to enjoy their fancy meals because an army of nuns handle all the practical logistics. The men do not have to lift a finger, and they mostly do not notice them, unless the nuns want to be noticed. While I did not precisely guess the winner's secret, I was in the right ballpark. If Conclave has a flaw, it is impeccably crafted, except in one way. The lighting on black skin sucked and was not rich in texture. I know that lighting for optimal color is hard with so many colors to balance, but a movie of this high quality should be able to do it. Cardinal Adeyemi was almost rendered invisible in the dying Pope's tenebrous chambers. Also, I noticed that when characters spoke in Italian, Cardinal Adeyemi's name rarely was in the subtitles. It is a bit frustrating because as a movie reviewer, there is no guarantee that IMDb will have the complete name listed, and I know that as an ignorant American, I would not necessarily nail the spelling of a Nigerian family name, so I was waiting for it, and it did not happen for a long time. For a leading candidate, his framing was more obscured until his story was in focus in comparison to his foil, Tremblay. It could be because Lithgow is a bigger star than Samadi, but the lighting struck me from the opening scene since I could barely discern his features, so I got hyper-focused as the movie unfolded. While film is a visual medium, I prioritize narrative, so it did not affect my enjoyment. But as someone who does not typically belabor these details, it was pretty glaring for me to notice. While Conclave will probably strain itself with self-congratulatory pats on the back for being so daring and almost visually perfect, it is a fun, dishy movie that is supposed to soothe us and let us know everything will work out. If only real life was as perfectly stylized to have a pat happy ending. A candidate whose only scandal is being himself, directed by Edward Berger, screenplay by Peter Straughan, produced by Tessa. Juliette, Howell, Michael Jackman, Alice Dawson, Robert Hess, starring Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, Sergio Castello, Isabella Rossellini, cinematography Steph Fontaine, edited by Nick Emerson, music by Volker Berlin, production companies FilmNation Entertainment House Productions, distributed by Black Bear, United Kingdom. Focus features United States, release states August 30th, 2024 in late October 25th, 2024, in TED States November 29th, 2024 in TED Kingdom. Running time 120 minutes. Countries United Kingdom, United States. Language English. Budget $20 million. Box office $500,000. So guys, this is their view of Conclave OVA and some information about it. Like today's video, please let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.